So I'm going to open it up to you all for questions or thoughts that you all had from some of these films. The first question is always the hardest.
My question is for, I'm trying to remember all my questions for all of you because I had major questions about everything, but I was going to ask, so I have two off the top of my head. Emily, I know that you often write about relationships between humans and non-humans. I was curious.
I never thought about that before. That's not like a thing with me. That doesn't express any personal interest that I have. It's just coincidence.
All right, I'll take it. And then Eva, I was curious, your cinematography is so sensual. And I was wondering, I saw that, I think you yourself filmed one of your pieces, and I was curious if you shot all of them, and also what your relationship is with shooting yourself and or working with your cinematographer.
Yeah, I always shoot myself. That one in Morocco I shot with my boyfriend. But yeah, I feel like when I'm shooting, I don't know, maybe it's for other people who shoot as well, but you kind of disappear into a different world, again to a zone. It's almost like a meditation session, right? So for me, it's the most comfortable place. And also like when I speak to people, when I interact with my whatever characters, that's the most comfortable place for me. So yeah, I just love it. Thank you for compliments.
With respect, I actually remembered one other question, which is Lyric and David. It's so intense, your piece, and I felt all the contradictions in your character. There was one moment especially that I wanted clarification, which may, sometimes as a filmmaker you don't even want clarification, but so when he's saying that you guy wouldn't throw rice at a wedding, he means like he doesn't want to even like peck a bride with that, that's what he means. And I guess I was curious, that conversation I interpreted in a totally different way. I interpreted him as saying like this guy is a threat until later when I realized that he was saying he wasn't a threat. And I guess I was wondering, did he convey mixed messages to the FBI, or was he pretty clear that this guy was not a threat?
I think the way that we've simplified it for this version, and he's saying basically that he's not a threat. But in that conversation, the unedited conversation, he contradicts himself at least like 17 times. So, and the full film will hopefully be able to delve into just how frequently he flips and flops, spins around this very amorphous truth that he exists in.
Yeah, following up on that, talk a little bit about what we saw there versus what you're working on.
Well, what you saw there is effectively a piece that we've been using for fundraising because we're still in production. But as far as how the final film will play out, pretty much you saw little elements of what will be there, like his history. He was a former member of the Black Panther Party, so we're going to be looking at the party, how does someone coming from that who considers himself to be a nationalist and for the community sort of now work for the FBI wholeheartedly. So it'll also get into the FBI and how, informants have been used for a long time, starting with the Black Panther Party. Arguably, they're the reason the party was destroyed. And so he lived through all of those contradictions, and now to go on and do the work. And you saw Khalifa, the case with Khalifa al-Akhili, that's sort of the narrative arc of the film, so to speak. That's what's happening in the present. And Tariq Shah's case is in the past, and obviously his own personal history. So these will all be elements of the film. The question was, are we scared for our lives? There's been a lot of precedent, obviously, with like the whole Edward Snowden. Laura Poitras is a big inspiration. So obviously there are people that are doing, this level of work to a higher degree. But I think one of the things, I'm sure it'll come up, how we know the subject. He was my neighbor, and I've known him for over a decade. So there has to be, kind of an element of trust to do a project like this. And I kind of think he won't fuck me. So I'm not fearful, because we're operating in truth. We're good journalists.
Or whether he'll be less than amused.
So I have a question for any of you. As you began the work you do, what scares you the most about
will totally start. So I think it's very easy when the work is done to look back at it and be like, oh yeah, and I was walking in that place when I had that idea, and then we stayed up all night to finish that part, and we were worried that it wouldn't come out, and now it's all done. You know, it's because it looks so perfect. You know, obviously you're seeing work here that, you know, we're proud of. But, you know, going into the next one, I'm going into the next one now, and it's like everything is terrifying. What is the most scary? I think the scariest thing that anybody has to do when they make a thing is to decide what thing to make. You have a lot of ideas and you're like, what do I pursue? Or like you have a lot of ways that the story could end. And choosing one possibility and committing to it and abandoning the others and letting them die, I believe takes a certain type of moral courage.
Probably balancing my life while making something and like having a living. That's really it. That's what
I would say not being true to the people in the film. So I feel like sometimes maybe, I mean just in general, but then also sometimes when you get over ambitious, you kind of follow what you want to do and you're not really paying attention to what the people in the story want to say or portray or don't want to say or portray. So that scares me.
I'm the person who just holds the microphone when it's idling because I'm in the middle of the row.
Oh.
Sorry, guys.
I already said what I'm afraid of.
I guess for me quickly is like documentary inevitably becomes part of like the historical record. So for me, it's like I have to get it right, you know? Like so everything about the character should be in there, all the nuances I know, and that's a scary thing. Because how the hell do you record all that?
So, following up with you two, how did you get both sides of that? Which side did you start getting first, and then how did you access the other side?
I'll do half. Okay, so the first side is obviously the informant, and we started filming with him first. Fortuitously, when we started filming, literally the first weekend we started production, he was already on the case. So we started getting information from his perspective. So this is what I'm doing, here's who I'm following, here's what he looks like, here's his daily schedule, here's where he lives. But that was quite limiting, because what the hell could we do, because it was an active investigation. You know, and so the level, active investigation means arguably the informant's communications were monitored, his communications with us. So we assumed that everything he told us, they knew he told us, meaning the FBI. So as journalists in that situation, we had very little leeway. You know, we could pretty much just get his word for it for a long time.
So we spent about a month and a half filming with him as he was describing this investigation into Khalifa, who lived down the block from him, and we knew that he lived down the block, we knew where he lived. And we'd been advised by a lawyer that if we had attempted to reach out to him, we could be accused of tampering with a federal investigation. And we were struggling with ways of how to balance the story, just because hearing it solely from his perspective, you know, he's not a very trustworthy narrator. But it was this amazing coincidence, you know, we ended up getting an email forwarded to us from Khalifa, and he had just figured out through a very long series of Google searches, he figured out that he's being set up by the FBI. He sent an email asking for help from journalists, activists, lawyers, and we used that email as a way to introduce ourselves and say that we want to film him and find out more about his relationship with Sharif. We were on our way to film him for morning prayer. They had issued, one of his friends had been called before a grand jury to testify about the gun charge a few days earlier. So he knew that they were closing in. They were trying to come up with an indictment on him. And so we knew that we had to act fast and spend as much time as we could with him before they would arrest him, because it seemed pretty definite that was going to happen.
Why did you choose that Manson tape? Like, what brought that to you? I mean, how did you get a hold of it?
I had my undergrad film at Sundance in 2010, and a producer came up to me after my screening, and he was like, "Wow, that's crazy. your art is insane. I know somebody that is friends with Charles Manson. You guys should be friends and make a film. And I was like, all right. And that's what happened.
Did you speak
What?
Did you reach out to Manson at all?
No, it's basically impossible. He only
Okay.
talks to a few select people. But he knows of me, and he gave me his blessing. I'm not named, though. I'm not that cool.
Eva, did you know the Korean gentleman Nelson? How did you come upon him?
I have a bit of a peanut addiction, so every time I was walking from school, I would stop at the store, and then he had all his photos of Vietnam and whatever. So I just came back and I said, "Can I film you?" And he said, "Sure," and that was it.
Eva, based on that film that you did of the Korean gentleman, I just wondered if you've done any work on the war in Yugoslavia.
Not the war in Yugoslavia, but I am doing my first feature film now about political refugees and asylum seekers in Cyprus. But it more has to do with identity and how we... I'm really bad at this. How we construct our identity and then how we act from that place, and what if we disengage from that. So it's a little bit personal, because I immigrated to Cyprus and then there's a whole surge of new immigrants coming, but not specifically about the war in Yugoslavia.
So one more question.
As far as the informant goes, what were some of the hoops you had to jump through as far as documentary filmmakers to get approval? And the FBI had to be let know that you were, or you're just guerrillaing it and saying, let's make a movie.
We said screw and let's make a movie.
Okay.
We talked to a lawyer before getting too deep into it, and he said, as long as you don't do X, Y, and Z, you should be okay.
The FBI, obviously, as journalists, we think the FBI, we owe them a right of reply to all of this. But it's going to come because we're still in production, so it'll come toward the end. For obvious reasons.
We'll do one more.
From TV, movies, and all, we always think that confidential informants are very secretive and undercover. So this guy was your neighbor. How did you find out that he was an informant and approach him on just after you?
Well, I'm no sleuth. He actually confessed. That's the short answer. He confessed. If you see his personality, he considers himself to be a survivalist. So for years while working with the FBI, everything's under the table. They don't confirm anything. Payment, your existence, like he said, you're pretty under the table. However, him being a survivalist, he always wanted to prove that he did exist. So for years, he's just been, keeping notes that were supposed to be turned in and shredded. And so he's just that type of person. So I think for years, whether it was me or he just wanted to tell his story at some point. And
At the peak of his career, he was making that much. He was working several high-profile investigations at the same time, and was being paid a lot of money to do so. When we began filming him, and part of the reason why he's talking to us is because at that point he was not even getting reimbursed for gas money for driving this suspect all around town, and so he said, "I'm on my, what's the point of staying in this business? Let me seek my fortune elsewhere." Because he's been, this is actually the site, within the, while we were filming, his identity was revealed by Khalifa, and that's actually the second time that his identity has been outed. And so he's pretty much useless as an informant to the FBI at this point. I think there's a few kind of scattered attempts that they've made and he's made to get, with the FBI? There's been several other informants who've come out and spoken about their relationships with the FBI. But I think the FBI is reluctant to pursue charges or to bring these people into a courtroom where they'll have to testify, and all this information and material will come out in public record that they absolutely do not want to come out to be part of the public record.
So I want to thank everybody for coming out and give another round of applause.